Let's see what happens here. Receiving your contents. Your audience will see it. Okay, we are live. There we go. Yeah, so it looks like we just need to update our shit.
Boom.
We're back.
We're back.
Let me make sure we're in this.
Lagging.
I'm gonna come closer.
Sorry, though. Cool. Let's start by touching our fingertips together.
Okay.
Creating the heart.
So we're back. First episode was a success. At least we thought so. This one will be better. Hopefully.
Nope.
We kind of wanted to do this just to be a little bit more regular with our broadcasts. Hopefully we can get into doing this a little bit more on a scheduled basis once our schedules permit. We're both very busy businessmen with important lives. So it's kind of something that's on the radar, but not all the time. Anyway.
Fuck Donald Trump.
Fuck Trump and his bullshit politicizing of this issue. Gun control. I'm sick of fucking kids dying. It's ridiculous. He shouldn't be elected anymore.
Yeah, no one needs assault rifles or silencers or
Yeah, I don't.
any of those things. What's the story with that? How old was that kid?
So the story with that was the kid was a student there. I'm not sure what grade he was in, but he got expelled like prior to this event happening. And apparently, all of the kids who knew of the guy were claiming that he seemed like the type of guy who would do that. He was off. He has a history of mental illness. I don't know if he was medicated at the time, as is common with these sort of situations. If you do research into these, a lot of the times you'll find out that these guys are being treated for some sort of like mental illness, and that seems to be like the talking point for the right a lot of the times. That the issue isn't guns per se; it's more a mental health issue. Which I somewhat agree with, because I think this country does have an issue with mental health. Look at how many celebrities are so heavily medicated and stuff as well. It's very apparent. But I don't think that the answer to treating a mental health issue is expanding gun rights. And I don't think that that's going to help anything at all.
Yeah, I'm kind of frozen on the issue. I'm still like I feel mostly desensitized.
Yeah.
To it. I feel like it's happened so many times throughout my lifetime. I remember in school when they first incorporated the Code Blue drill.
What's that?
Which was like essentially someone would come over the intercom, say that there was a Code Blue drill, and everyone would huddle into a corner of the classroom. The teacher would basically stand in front of the whole huddle in this like shield mechanism sort of way, would often like push the desk in front of the kids. And I just remember thinking immediately like that we'd only ever done tornado drills or fire drills.
Yeah, natural disaster type
and
shit.
Suddenly, I think after the Virginia Tech shooting was like when they really started to incorporate it.
Yeah.
For the first time they would do that, and we would huddle into a corner and like just kind of think about the situation while we were all sitting there silently. Like if you could for a moment not think about like your hormones since you were in middle school at the time.
Yeah.
And how close you suddenly were to like someone you always wanted to be close with. But yeah, maybe that was just me.
I mean,
The Code Blue drill.
you know, not to make light of the situation at all, but it's like, imagine like you're sitting there and like part of like natural cycle of being like a young man is like the appearance of like random boners, you know, at time. Like, what if you're in class at that time and then all of a sudden this shit happens?
The Code Blue drill.
It's like, I go from having a random boner to like, oh shit, Code Blue, like legit Code Blue, not a drill. There's a dude out there shooting people up. Like that dude, suck a little bit even more.
Oh, you're saying during the actual
Yeah, during the actual shooting, you're just like, oh fuck, this is a code blue.
Yeah, it doesn't. You don't control that aspect.
No, you don't.
Not that quickly in your life.
Yeah, man. I feel you on the desensitization aspect, though. When I was in school, because I'm a significant amount older than Caleb, if you guys don't know, at least 30 years. Just kidding. It's only a decade. But when I was in school, high school, we didn't even have any sort of like code blue drill. Like prior to what you had mentioned, it had all just been natural disaster type of stuff. So I remember the first shootings were very rare, and they were few and far between, and the media had us convinced that they were just these one-off sort of situations where the kids were extremely troubled and had bad homes and all kinds of other stuff, which could still hold true. I mean, a lot of times, I guess with this recent guy, I forget his name, but he was like an orphan, all kinds of other stuff. He was living with obviously a foster family at the time. Man, I really wish I knew more about this whole situation, but like I've kind of intentionally been tuning it out. I'm sick of hearing about these sort of things, and like it's not that I don't feel for the people that lost somebody in this situation, because man, I can't imagine like what would happen to me if something happened with Logan. Like, that would be horrible. Logan is my son, just in case anybody decides to watch this at some point, and he's 8. So I can't really even try to picture that, because it really stresses me out. So I think that we do need to pay attention to these kinds of things, but I think that the media also plays a giant role in this sort of thing, because the amount of coverage that they give to this sort of thing really just almost immortalizes these characters who perpetuate these things.
Yeah.
And it gives them relevance.
The way the media covered that Dylan kid, just like a year or two ago, sort of made him into like, put him on a pedestal, for lack of a better word, of just like being covered to the point where like this was a newsworthy person and like something that could draw attention to your life. Like, I'm sure that kid didn't have a ton of attention in his life, but suddenly it was gained through like some acts of terrorism.
Yeah.
And perhaps just like everyone covering this so aggressively like invites more children to do that, or invites more kids to think that like they can make a name for themselves for the first time.
Yeah.
When they feel like they're sort of nameless within their community or within their family.
Yeah.
Within their school, amongst their peers.
Yeah, definitely.
Suddenly they have a name that everyone knows.
For sure. I mean, it's indirectly giving them a platform to spout out any sort of like bullshit that they wanted to. Who was that one kid in Santa Barbara a couple of years ago who shot up the school? He had like a YouTube channel that he released videos on leading up to this event, where he would constantly talk about like lack of attention from girls and how girls were just like so mean to him all the time, even though he was a quote unquote nice guy. Yeah, man. And then when he did this horrible thing, everybody like went and searched his YouTube videos, and so all of the shit that he had been saying for months was suddenly just validated by this horrible act, because everybody searched it. Everybody was engaged in this whole thing because of the amount of media coverage that happens on it. And the thing that really kind of like irritates me with this whole process with the media and how it functions in this regard is that even when there's nothing left to say and there's no further developments in the situation at hand, they constantly are just panning back and forth through the same like 3 or 4 sort of like talking points.
Sure.
Or they'll show a clip of like somebody who was there at the scene, and they'll keep going back and forth. There's like no new developments on it, so there's really no necessity in covering it at this point in time. And I know that sounds like really, really, really insensitive, but I just think that with the amount of time that's already being devoted to this kind of stuff and how frequent it's been happening, the more you show people and the more you give validation to these guys, the harder it gets to prevent this sort of thing from happening again, because some other kid is going to see this and then think, oh fuck, this guy had the idea right, because now everybody knows this kid's fucking story, and I mean, he was a piece of shit. Like, why do we care about him?
Yeah, we shouldn't. It seems to me too that like the most practical step at this point is to start like electing people who actually see this as an issue that like can't be bought from them. Like constantly, this issue has just been like suppressed by donations from the NRA to the people that we elect.
Yeah,
and we haven't elected anyone who has put us on like the forefront of like we actually have to stand up against the NRA and say that like what was working 100 years ago or however long the NRA has been around isn't working anymore.
Right.
And we live in a different culture where like this opportunity has been like made available to so many kids. Possibly, like I don't even know how this kid got his gun.
They said he lawfully bought it.
Really?
Yeah, he obtained it legally.
Yeah.
And that's the issue. It's like...
So the issue isn't like, this kid wasn't a documented patient with like chronic mental health issues necessarily. Like if he was able to go and buy a firearm.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't know. Like, I mean, he very well could have been, but at this point, like, I haven't done enough research to really say whether or not he has been. As far as I know, it was known that he did have some sort of, like, mental issues.
Okay.
And the people who knew him definitely thought that he was the kind of, like, they joked about it, apparently. Like, it was like a running joke that, oh, he's definitely the kind of dude who would shoot up the fucking school. And then apparently one day he did. But he still was able, I mean, even worse so then. He was able to buy a fucking gun with all of these accusations and shit surrounding him, which is even more ludicrous to me.
Yeah.
Because that's what Republicans and right-wing people tend to argue, is that it's a mental health issue and that we need to be focusing on that. But the problem with the mental health issue in this country right now is that I think we're overly... I mean, this is like a can of worms and probably going to dive into, some bullshit here. But I mean, I think society at this point in time is overly stimulated with live streams and video games and Vine and mini shows, Instagram, Facebook. I mean, it's just so much information at an instant, and everybody expects that sort of thing all the time, and you're always preoccupied. There's never really any time where people are like just left to their own thoughts anymore.
Right.
And I think there's something to be said for that.
Yeah, which kind of leads into what I was thinking, which is that like just one component of this that can be fixed is a mental health issue.
Mm-hmm.
The main practical component that can be fixed is electing leaders that like decide that you can't have silencers on your semi-automatic weapons like that 18-year-olds can buy.
Yeah.
To say that it's a mental health issue is true, but it also means that you somehow think that over the like near period of time we're gonna fix the mental health issue, and that's more unlikely than fixing like just the laws that we have in place currently, where people can buy these automatic weapons that can kill like tons of people with a single finger.
Yeah, man.
If you want to change the entire consciousness of like the youth, that could take centuries. It's going to take centuries.
Yeah.
It's going to take so much more time than it is for like leaders to get elected and just change the laws that we have in place currently.
Yeah, and I think that's the most frustrating aspect of like this whole thing, is that how many more truly innocent people need to be taken away from their families? And like, I think those have been some of the most touching posts that I've read on social media, where it's like a parent writing to a lawmaker, and it's just like, yo, my daughter was just murdered in this, and you're still advocating and have refused to even perhaps speak on the issue at all, and people are dying, and now it's my son, it's my daughter, it's I mean,
but your answer to the issue is like, oh, we should have fixed that kid and his mental health before he got to this point.
Yeah,
maybe not. Maybe we should just made it completely unavailable for him to ever have that weapon in his hands.
Exactly. I mean, and
that seems like a better solution to even to reach out to a kid that's being fucked up like constantly and just conditioned constantly by his culture and his peers.
Yeah.
And that led him to this point. You interfering with that is such minimal amounts of progress compared to just making sure that kid never gets the gun in his hands.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think ultimately a lot of the issues that stem from them wanting to have their hands in that mental health aspect of things is the relationship that we have, or that they have, with the drug companies. I mean, there's something to be said for the amount of money that is made off of opiates and antidepressants and other sort of stimulants that are sold through doctors, and they're just peddling this shit. Meanwhile, like really helpful drugs like hemp and CBD and things like that are still classified as illegal and demonized. Through this stupid fucking prohibition, yet it's okay to watch, celebrities who are just, once such talented people devolve into these, like, shells of what they used to be.
Sure.
I mean, look at Whitney Houston, look at Michael Jackson, look at fucking Britney Spears, what happened to her a few years ago. I mean, it happens to so many people. And
they killed Tom Petty recently.
Yeah, it killed fucking
killed
Tom Petty. It
killed
Heath Ledger.
Prince.
Yeah, Prince. Like, all of these things. And we have yet to look at that, but it's because the fucking companies are making so much money off of this shit. They don't care if you get better or not.
It's really unfortunate to think that, like, sort of the timeline for the progression of CBD and for hemp use as a medicinal option is probably just going to be progressed with the capitalist monetizing of that product.
Yeah.
So as soon as there's the same line of monetization that there is with insurance companies and pharmaceutical reps and all of the people that can make commissions off of some product.
Yeah.
Once that's in place for CBD, unfortunately, it'll probably take off because everyone can finally start making money off of it in the same way that they would with fucking fentanyl.
Yeah.
Or like the other drugs that are being pushed to doctors right now.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I fear what happens at that point when it becomes this sort of like global market. Because of just look at how everything else is fucked over by mass production of it.
Yeah, then how controlled is it?
Yeah.
How controlled are the doses anymore? Yeah. How clean are the doses? Is everyone just buying the cheapest product that they can? Mm-hmm. I'm sure they are now. Like, if you go out and try to find THC pills now, the cannabis that was placed into those THC pills and then processed through like a million different chemical processes likely was not the same quality that you could just go and buy cannabis at like a medicinal dispensary.
Yeah, absolutely.
And ingest it orally or some way that's healthier than taking some crazy like genetically modified THC pill.
I know. I mean, it's crazy to even like think that at some point we're just gonna have like these GMOs like running rampant in that field too.
Yeah.
And exactly. It's like something that has been largely debated in all platforms throughout the government. And
it's gross, man. When we catered to the hospital recently, we brought a bunch of food over, essentially for one pharmaceutical rep that was just trying to sway a group of cardiologists to buy her pharmaceutical. So how many people made money that day?
Yeah.
Like at the very bottom, we made money catering for these people, like just to sway their opinion on the pharmaceutical rep. The pharmaceutical rep made money because she probably made sales and commission at the end of the day. The cardiologist got a piece of that sale at the end of the day. The pharmaceutical company obviously got the biggest cut of that.
For sure.
All of the doctors that now use it every time they prescribe it to a patient, they get a piece of that. Yep. The rep gets a piece of that back. What's to stop that cycle when everyone can get paid?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about how far-reaching it is, it's got its claws in everything.
Yeah,
like it's insane. And I struggle to think that any sort of real attempt made by the government would even do anything to begin with. And I mean, let's be honest, it's never going to happen.
No,
because
just economically shutting down that industry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just from my like limited knowledge of economics, that can't happen.
No.
Like, that can't just happen overnight.
It's too big.
Where suddenly
Yeah.
like Vicodin doesn't exist.
Yeah,
The
it's
number of people
too big to fail.
invested in that is too big to fail. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. That would be such a bursting of a bubble.
Yeah. Yeah, enormous bursting of the bubble. And I mean, again, you know, you think about all the other industries that are impacted by that. I mean, those get fucked over too. But you know, in this sense, going back to your original point about you know, the government focuses on that aspect of why this event happened. You know, the mental health aspect of it. When really just the availability of the gun to begin with is the problem.
Yeah.
And you know, I have friends who are gun owners. Dan, you know, is a gun owner. Like we have plenty of people who are responsible gun owners, and it does kind of suck because, you know, say with this recent brash of murders happening related to vehicles, you know, like people are like running their vehicles through fucking huge crowds and just mowing people down.
Yeah.
You know, suddenly they make fucking Toyota Tacomas illegal, you know, and it's like, oh, so I can understand a responsible gun owner's perspective from that, you know, point of view, but at the same time, you have to understand that the purpose of the apparatus, a car, is transportation. To get from point A to point B, to transport goods, to load up. Its intended purpose is not to fucking end life.
Sure. Yeah. The scale between like positive and negative impact of the vehicle is pretty much non-comparable to the gun.
Exactly.
The number of people that actually defend themselves in like a home robbery with their gun that they think they need is unbelievable. Like,
yeah.
One in some like thousands of gun owners actually have something like that happen to them.
Exactly.
And studies also show that just having the gun in your home makes you more available to some sort of violent crime.
Exactly. And
happening
suicide.
To you, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Not even necessarily a crime, a suicide within the home, an accident with the home, an accident with your children, an accident with your children's friends that are interested in your gun.
Yeah, and it's not even an insignificant amount that the percentage is increased by. It's like a hefty fucking, like, it's like 4 times more likely to kill yourself if you have fucking a gun available to you, you know? And that's insane to me. I was watching Rogan's podcast recently with Hinchcliffe. Did you see that one?
Mm-hmm.
So they were just kind of like mulling over the events of Florida and everything, and they kind of got onto some gun statistics. And as you know, Joe is a gun owner himself and an avid hunter, but he is at the point too where he's like, we've got, I think it's something like 50 million, almost like pushing 60 million more guns in this country than there are people. We've got like 315 million people in this country, and there are like 360 to 370 million guns. There are more guns in our country than there are people.
And I know a handful of gun owners, but for the most part, the people that I know, I'm pretty sure don't own guns. So
yeah,
that means people own multiple guns.
Multiple guns. And for those who argue, you know, I'm sorry, but I just have zero respect for the people who are, you know, those who are like, well, I gotta defend myself against the government tyranny.
Yeah.
Well, good luck with that, bro, because they're gonna be hitting you with drone strikes and fucking like calculated mathematical equations, you know, from a distance. So your little pea shooter fucking AR-15 at that point is going to be useless.
Yeah, it's done.
The problem with it now is that it's affecting innocent people and killing children, and that's like the biggest crime of all, because like they're the most innocent fucking beings aside from animals on this planet that just don't deserve any of that. Sure. You know,
to make the fight fair, we might as well make right to bear arms the right to bear drones.
Yeah, exactly.
Or the right to bear helicopters.
Yeah,
because your right to bear arms is just hardly a line of defense against what it used to mean.
Exactly. And when does your right to bear arms trump someone's right to live? You know,
sure.
Like your right to bear arms does not outweigh the insured survival of someone else.
Yeah.
You know, and their right to safety. I mean, I know that's not actually like citing anything constitutional because there is no right to safety in the Constitution. I get that, but I mean, the pursuit of happiness is you have to be alive to do that.
Sure.
And if someone's right to fucking own a gun is outweighing that, which it currently is, then something is really, really wrong, fundamentally with the system, down to like the most rudimentary aspects of it. And there's somebody online, I don't know who it is, but I've seen like reposts of like all these politicians tweeting out, oh, my condolences and prayers and thoughts and blah, 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 blah. We've seen these fucking 18 million times. There's this dude who's like responding to all of their tweets and their posts with just how much money they've received from the NRA in political backing,
which is unbelievable.
It's an unbelievable amount.
Yeah,
unbelievable. Marco Rubio alone,
$100,000.
more than that. Marco Rubio alone has received like over $3 million from the NRA. I'm not exactly sure what that money was used for, but it's from the NRA.
Just campaigning, you have to like gain those campaign funds.
Yeah.
And the NRA has the funds to do it.
And huge funds. I mean, think of it. There are more guns than people. That means people are buying the shit out of guns.
Yeah.
That means it's a huge fucking industry.
Yeah, and buying the stickers. And
buying the stickers, buying the fucking the hats, all that bullshit too. The training courses that come along with it now. The guys who are the firearms instructors, the concealed carry permits, everything that goes along with that.
That really just sort of instill fear within you. Like when you're buying a firearm, what's their best marketing deployment at the time going to be? It's going to be instilling the concern in you that possibly you may have to use that firearm, or that you're likely going to have to use that firearm.
Yeah, so they're like training a condition.
This is why you should buy like a more powerful firearm.
Yeah.
Or this is like, based on your home situation, how should you purchase your firearm? Which is so misleading.
Yeah.
And concerning that they could even like instill that within someone. But I know plenty of people that left the gun store more concerned about home robbery than they were ever concerned before.
Yeah.
It just wasn't even a thought in their mind necessarily.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I'm sure if you look at the statistics, like armed home robberies, like the break-ins and shit like that, are such a low percentage of shit that actually happens in this country. What is actually happening is we're over-medicated, as we just discussed, and internet fucking stimulation, like we're too stimulated, over-medicated, and we have too many fucking guns available to us. And on top of that, I mean, if you just think about like the population growth and booms in certain cities and stuff like that, we're starting to encroach on each other's personal space just because of the amount of people that exist on the planet. And that also adds to people's stress levels and a bunch of other shit.
Yeah.
I mean, it's there are a lot of connections that can be made to this sort of thing, but the problem is still that we have people running this country who just refuse to acknowledge the issue at hand, and the fact is people have too many guns.
And then the question is, who's the one to put the laws in place that actually, like, not to phrase this negatively, but like to take guns away from people? What do you do?
Yeah.
What do you do with all the people? What do you do with the hundreds of millions of guns that are out there currently? Do you actively take those away from people? Probably not. It seems like a instant like cause for some sort of tyranny or some sort of like anarchy within the states. Do you implement new laws where people can't buy those? I'm sure this is a conversation happening in the government all the time, hopefully. And then how much power do you give the government at the end of the day?
Yeah, I mean, that's the other issue, too. It's like,
do you fall back on large corporations or large government entities to actually personally affect some people's lives? Honestly, that seems like the best route right now.
Yeah.
Within this sort of like balanced society that we have currently that has like socialist aspects where the government does have a say in your day-to-day life to a degree.
Yeah.
And also the capitalist aspect where you can go out and basically do whatever you want all day, every day. But you can't do it with an assault rifle in your hand.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
Yeah.
I think the true solution is you just go into each individual's house, pull out your dick,
Each individual's house.
slap him across the cheek,
Show them the government.
show him the government, say, "God damn it! Give me your fucking gun!" Right across each cheek, dude. Just pull it out. Fucking eggplant emoji. Yeah, I mean, truly, man, I don't know what the solution is, because it would suck to just, you know, go through this regression of, okay, well, you guys can't have your toys because nobody can play nice with them, so
Yeah.
you're taking everything away. You know, nobody wants that to happen, and nobody wants to give the government too much power, because in every situation past, that's always turned out negatively.
Yeah.
I mean, it just has. You look at, like, monarchy societies and shit like that, too. I mean, it's just way too much power to too few people, and that's never a good thing. So we need to be careful with what we do there, because I think we're kind of, like, stumbling on that sort of thin ice with free speech, too. You know, like, that's another thing. You know, college campuses right now are a battleground with that. Because you've got very, very heavy leftist influenced ideologies clashing with, like, the new sort of, like, neocon alt-right movements, and it's weird because it resembles so much like almost like Islamic extremism, you know, with how polarized people become on this political spectrum, and then you get these right-wing guys who are just all about nationalism and, you know, closing off the borders and really, really, really just cutting down on any sort of, like, beneficial programs and spending and things like that. And then you've got other people who are just like, yo, we need to create programs for literally everything under the sun.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't be allowed to say this, and you shouldn't be allowed to say that. And
historically, when that happens, you create more extremists.
yeah, exactly.
So
That's just this response that happens.
with most topics now, it seems like we're navigating through some questions in history that have possibly come up through other narratives, but are coming up now, and we're navigating through, like, these entirely new waters where we're just trying not to create extremists on either side.
Yeah.
But as soon as you implement policy, it seems like the inevitable is that you cause extremists.
Yeah. Yeah.
With the gun issue, like, the extremists now are only going to become more radical as soon as some policy is implemented on both sides, probably.
Yeah.
Which is a frightening thought, but at the same time, like, if we're not experimenting, then what are we doing? We're just perpetuating the same cycle that's been happening.
Yeah, I mean, we're just
When was
caught in this
Columbine, man? Columbine was
98.
yeah over a decade ago.
Yeah.
Which unfortunately sparked, like, an entire wave of conversation about this, but the conversation has hardly changed.
Yeah, it's still the same thing. It's still exactly the same thing. You would think with things like that happening back in the 90s, and just sort of, like, scratching the surface of this problem of mental health and the availability of guns, you would think that the conversation would have evolved by now. I mean, we're talking literally 2 decades now. This is 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't even know if I have the date right on that. It could have been sooner than 98. But I mean, 2 decades of the same conversation, and just the fact that it really just comes down to the amount of money that's involved with it is fucking ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's stupid. I mean, lives always. At least I mean. It's so hypocritical to, on one hand, want to police everything that happens within a woman's uterus and shit, and police that, and you care about life then. You know, that's when life matters, when you're a cluster of cells developing within inside of a woman, and they want to police that, and police abortion, and everything else. and not allow for choice where it really matters, but instead overlook the fact that hundreds of people are dying every single year to needless violent acts like this. It's just fucking beyond stupid.
Yeah. It's hard to fall back statistically on the places that have implemented policy to, like Chicago, for example, has had like the no carry policy,
but still remains
for a long time, but remains the most violent city in the country.
Yeah.
So NRA activists and gun activists will use that as an example and say that
it's their number one talking point.
Yes, definitely the number one talking point. The reality is, in the years 2015 or 2016, over 60% of the guns that were involved with violent crime came from the Indiana border, where the laws are relaxed. Yeah. Where they could have easily obtained a firearm at a gun show.
That's interesting.
In Indiana, gone back to the south or west side of Chicago, sold it for a fraction of the cost of what it might have been if you obtained it legally somewhere in Chicago, and committed a violent crime with it. And those people don't talk about those facts. That's a majority of violent crime happening with legally obtained guns that came from across the border.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's their really, really superficial, I should say, superficial interpretation of statistics. Yeah. They do that a lot to really place a lot of blame on violent crimes being predominantly committed by minorities and stuff and such. But you fail to look at the communities that these people have grown up in.
Yeah, sure. You fail to look at the fact that these people have been like in this systematically unfair place for generations. And that's a factor like so much larger than their ability or not ability to obtain firearms in the city of Chicago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like just the fact that they're in that place in this like consistently institutionalized culture means more statistically and means more for like the overall argument than it does just talking about how easy or not easy it is to obtain those firearms.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I had no idea that's what they would do, like obtain them.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are only the firearms that were collected after the fact, after the crime. Yeah. So that statistic is just like the legally obtained statistic. The number of people that actually go across and then come back. You could buy a firearm in Chicago for $100.
Jesus. That's crazy.
Why? Because they're so cheap at gun shows in Indiana.
Yeah.
And because that became a whole new market on the streets in Chicago.
Mm-hmm. I imagine that definitely plays a role in places like Colorado too, where it's just like so easy to obtain. Because like we have gun shows like all the time. Here, you know. And
honestly, if I'm a criminal and I can obtain a gun at a gun show in Colorado and then go somewhere where the policy is far more strict and I can sell it for 5 times the price, and like, what's to stop that activity from happening?
Yeah, that's crazy. They don't understand that they've like actually created like an economy.
Sure,
within
a total economy for sure. Like just like expounding upon the economy that already is involved with the NRA and with just buying rifles and buying guns.
I mean, it's the same effect that that program that they were working on back in the early 2000s. I think it started in like Bush's administration and carried on through Obama's. It was called the Fast and the Furious, and essentially what it was they wanted to track a better way to track cartels. So they loaded up all these weapons and distributed them throughout Mexico and South America and stuff with the hopes that the cartels would get their hands on these guns and that they could track them that way. Mm-hmm. The problem is the cartels got their hands on the guns and then they lost track of them. So they just basically gave free fucking weapons to an already powerful group of fucking people. I mean, that's how the Los Zetas were created. Mm-hmm. I mean, they were highly trained military individuals that were trained by United States military people, and so they were trained in like tactical type of shit and all kinds of other stuff. And now they run a fucking very, very deadly cartel and rule with a fucking iron fist. It just seems like every time you try to counter something with tactics like that, it just backfires, and you further perpetuate the situation, and you just create, other smaller economies. In this case, Chicago, where now it's a highly sought after commodity because of the heavy restrictions that exist within Chicago, but because they don't exist anywhere surrounding it, those are just all imported.
Yep.
People can leave and come back, and
It almost seems like the arguments and conversations on the right have actively become distractions.
Yeah.
Distractions from disrupting a marketplace. Whatever they can do to keep the marketplace of weaponry from being disrupted, they'll talk about. Even if it's mental health, because most of the time those people are not talking about mental health until there's something like this, and mental health becomes the active distraction away from disrupting a marketplace that they're involved with.
Yeah. It's really funny.
One more thought about the kid too. That kid, his whole life has kind of been taught, likely, like we all are, that we need to be important and influential and like praised. Like the hierarchy is it constantly praises the people who receive the most praise at the top of the hierarchy. And this kid felt unimportant in his life. He felt unimportant in his community, in his relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And then this gave him some sort of stature amongst even that very small community. Even if this were like a very small thing where he maybe injured one person, at least he gained some sort of notoriety. But at the end of the day, like, he didn't need that, and you and I don't need that.
Yeah.
We can be influential and impactful, but it's not the most important thing in the world.
Yeah.
The kid doesn't mean shit. We don't mean shit.
Yeah.
He didn't have to mean shit. We don't have to mean shit.
Yeah, bro. I mean, I totally get that. And again, it just goes back to the fact that through this sort of activity, I mean, I don't even know the word for it, they're validated. Everything they've done up to that point is then validated.
Yeah.
And it just shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't, we shouldn't be treating it like that. Yeah, I mean, like, fuck that kid. He's not important. The important thing at the end of the day is human life, and everybody being able to achieve what they want. And when you just blatantly rob people of that because of shit like this, and then everything else that we've just discussed that's involved, all the money, all of the politics, it's such a disregard for human life that it's gross. It fucking makes me sick, because they just, at the end of the day, people are dying. People are dying. Families were ripped apart. It's
perhaps maybe it's an unfair thought experiment, but if you were to approach everyone and say, would you prefer to own the firearms that you currently own, or increase the chances of your child being endangered in some way at school? Like, no logical person is going to say that they would keep their firearms.
Yeah, exactly.
And obviously, like, saying 50% more likely just because there are firearms on the street is an unfair statistic. But whatever that statistic is, it's enough that we can at least say that, like, if we take these things off of the shelves or off of the fucking tables at gun shows, then we're lowering that statistic even slightly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the most, like, master-crafted, like, comedy bits I've ever seen on this sort of thing was John Oliver's takedown of, like, this super fucking, like, NRA advocate guy. And the guy at the end, I mean, I forget the whole bit myself, but at the end, the guy is basically reinforcing the same idea that John Oliver was trying to enforce. You know, that like if you oversaturate populations with guns, that just statistically speaking, the amount of deaths due to gun violence or just gun accidents are going to go up. And like this NRA guy was just like saying that at the end, and John Oliver's like, yeah, that's my point. So like, why are we going to make these more available to people? If the more we make them available to people, the more likely people are to either A, fuck up in the basic operation of one, because you can't count that out. Human operation of shit tends to lead to mistakes. You know, we're not perfect individuals. We're not programmed to operate guns and respond. And that's the other thing that pisses me off about these things. I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent here, but it's like these Republicans have like this delusional, these alt-right, these fucking gun advocates, these people have like this delusional perspective that they're going to be this hero in this situation, where if you if you did the statistical analysis of any sort of violent crime, and you place another person there with a gun, the likelihood of innocent people and death probably increases tenfold by having that person's response somewhere calculated in there. Because these people think that they're just going to respond like a fucking Western movie hero and just 100% accuracy. Bam! Got him. No, bro, that's not how it's going to happen. Because adrenaline and all kinds of other fucking like fight or flight mechanisms that are programmed deep within your fucking DNA are going to kick in. And not everybody is functioning at a level that's going to allow them to just act like a fucking secret agent in this type of shit. And so when you just throw guns, let's give teachers guns, and let's have an armed guard in this situation, and let's give the principal a gun, and you know, let's allow this. Like, these are not fucking soldiers. These are not Navy SEALs. These are not trained individuals. Okay, sure, well, we can offer them training programs and everything. That does not matter. It will take years of practice before people become truly proficient. And even in that situation, you're still going to have mistakes being made.
Yeah.
So the oversaturation issue is always going to be the problem. It's the fix to this equation here is not adding more guns in. It is not. It never will be. You know, people, they often reference cars. Well, vehicles kill more people per year. Well, that's because literally everyone in this country drives at some point in time. And just, you know, on a side note, vehicles are probably more restricted than guns are in this country, because you have to register it. You have to have a driver's license to operate it. If you do anything under the influence with it, you get fucked over.
Yeah, you're being... Every move is being, like, calculated by... just the police that are watching, or people around you. Like, if I see someone being incredibly reckless on the road, just like swerving all over the place, it's my right to call someone and say, hey, like, this is a license plate number or something. Yeah, you feel unsafe because of that person. Sure. But can you, you know, somebody's got an open carry and they're in a fucking, you know, they're in Chili's. Like, you see these videos on YouTube service all the time with, like, they have these open carry conventions, and really what it is just a bunch of dudes who are fucking like, well, let's go carry our fucking rifles into a Chili's. And they go and eat dinner, and like you see all these people just like watching that and are afraid. But just you can't call the police on that. Just imagine we're in a medieval situation. Yeah. And you're out to dinner with your family. Someone shows up with a sword on their hip.
Yeah. Exactly.
How's it any different? It's not. All of us are here enjoying company with each other, and then you show up with a deadly weapon that none of us have. Yeah. Like, I'm immediately on alert. Right. I'm immediately on alert if someone comes into my space that I'm comfortable in, has a gun on their hip, because I don't have a gun on my hip. Yeah. I don't have a gun. So immediately, like, my cortisol is raised, there's probably a bit of adrenaline going off, and I'm immediately just trying to think of how I would counteract if any situation were to arise where he even put his hand on his hip. Yeah. You know? Yeah. That's unfair to everyone in that space when someone walks in with a gun and puts everyone else on alert suddenly. Yeah, exactly. And that just makes things more dangerous. for everyone in the situation.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you calculate
Yeah.
A situation happening at that point. You have another gun. You have his buddy who has a gun as well. I mean, there's just so many things that could go wrong in that situation. And I'm sick of this fucking fantasy that like you're just going to be this hero. And then they reference like a couple of times where somebody actually was, a hero. And it's like, well, great, sure, but in 90% of these situations, that's not going to be the case.
Yeah, it's just not.
It's just not going to be the case. And like, yeah, another outlandish statistic. I mean, how many more fucking toddlers need to accidentally shoot their family members with these, these not toy? They're not toy guns. They're obviously real guns, but they're like, it's not uncommon for gun advocates to gift young children a gun for their birthday. I mean, you see this happen all the time, and then that kid fucking misoperates it and shoots their dad in the hip or worse in the face. And that's we're supposed to just kind of treat that as a tragedy, and like I don't feel sympathetic in those situations because why are you buying a fucking toddler, someone under under the age of dexterity development and just so much mental development to operate, like to even understand what it is that you're operating at that point. That's just ridiculous to me that you would ever even gift that to a child.
Yeah, honestly, if holding a gun in my hands at the age of 16 or 17 is even a scary thought.
Yeah,
like just the respect and the understanding that when you're holding a gun in your hand, you're essentially holding hostage the lives of everyone surrounding you in that area. Like I can picture tons of times where I probably mishandled a firearm that was given to me in complete trust by some adult when I was like 13, 14, 15, 16, whatever. And perhaps they didn't understand the severity of the situation.
Yeah.
Perhaps they didn't understand that, like, I didn't understand what that fucking thing in my hands was actually capable of.
Yeah.
Until you know what it's capable of, then it's too late.
Yeah, exactly. and maybe that's where my opinion is. Well, I shouldn't say maybe it is biased. I mean, I had a situation. I mean, I grew up with a friend whose younger brother shot his best friend in the face, and I just ever since then, I felt that it was unnecessary for his dad to even be owning the gun.
Right.
Why would he keep that in the house? It just doesn't make sense to me. And
on a more like sort of like level of spiritual progression, we should be removing the things from our lives that cause so much damage and that cause so much negative impact and that have statistically caused nothing but damage to culture, and perpetuated warfare and perpetuated like toxic feelings towards each other that can now be like finished.
Yeah, that's such a good word
some
for it. Like
mechanism.
it's just such a toxic sort of appendage to the human body, at that point, because it's like an extension of this power that people feel, this power trip, and they mask it by saying this illusion of safety, But it's really not safety that you're feeling at that point. It's this power that you have for other people. And you were talking about being unaware of that at that point. But like I think a lot of these people are aware of it, and they like the way it feels to be that guy.
And perhaps you're unsafe because you're a shitty member of society.
Exactly.
Perhaps you feel unsafe constantly because you're not kind and compassionate and loving the people.
Exactly. It's like the people who are defending.
If you feel like you are constantly on the defense, and that's why you need to have a firearm, you're probably on the defense because you're like giving such negative energy to people all day long that you feel like you have to defend yourself. Like,
I mean,
defend your life.
It's like in relationships with the people who are so concerned about what their partner is doing and shit all the time. usually, if you deep enough into those relationships, those are the people who are like engaging in like these, the flirtatious activity outside, because they have like this sort of guilty conscience mindset of like, well, I'm doing it this way, so everyone else must be too. Totally. It was like when Trump said all those comments about grabbing women by the pussy and stuff like that. And like all of the dirty talks that I've ever had, I can honestly say I've never once said I'm going to grab someone by their fucking vagina. Fucking ridiculous. But everybody came out and was defending him on those comments too. And like, oh, come on, boys will be boys. Everybody says that kind of stuff. And they find it really, really hard to believe when somebody's like, hey, no, I don't feel that way.
Right.
And
that discussion didn't come up necessarily. I feel like there were more people coming out and saying it's locker room talk, or more people coming out and saying like, I need to defend myself with a firearm.
Yeah.
Then there are people actively coming out with a dialogue and saying, like, even if that is the case, even if my culture growing up, that was the case, and I constantly heard people saying they need to defend themselves with firearms, or constantly heard them saying they need to place themselves in some sort of like patriarchal position with women in the same way that they're using like that locker room talk sort of.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we should just be putting an end to that.
Yeah.
And ultimately saying that, like, okay, maybe that was the case, but where are we going now?
Right. Yeah.
Because it's unfortunate that has been the case for so long.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, unfortunately, I just don't think that any, like, realistically, I don't think that any meaningful discussions are going to happen out of this whole event either. Something extraordinarily tragic is going to need to happen. Like one of the president's sons or something are going to need to be shot, or just a huge grotesque amount of people are going to need to be off.
Yeah, it's like how many people, man?
It's like when is this? When is this number?
Because apparently, like tens of people is not enough, or like 50 people is not enough.
Yeah, I mean, and
how recent was the Las Vegas shooting?
It was super recent. That was like the end of last year.
Yeah,
just a few months ago, and like 50-something people died in that.
And that dialogue just dissolved, like as quickly as it started.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's intended that way because the media covers what it wants through agenda setting. And I remember being in high school and covering the topic of agenda setting, and the way my teacher was explaining it was just like, this non-biased like approach, and it was just like, oh yeah, the media does this, they show you what they want to show you, blah, blah. And I remember thinking at that point in time, I was like, it just seems kind of fucked up that they have this agenda and you're going to be exposed to what they choose to expose you to.
Yep.
And you're going to feel whatever issues they feel are relevant are relevant.
Yeah, it's insane. I just heard recently that there's something like 4 or 5 conglomerates at this point that feed the news to everyone.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Like there are sub companies and sister companies, and
but they're all owned by
different
like the
entities,
same 5.
but it's the same 4 or 5 conglomerates that are shelling the news out to everyone.
Yeah, exactly. How does no one see an issue with that?
Yeah.
I
think that's why individualized dialogue and platforms like this are more important, because you can hear opinion and you can entertain different thoughts and ideas.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And hopefully, like this sort of more thoughtful and just like recycled way. Like I'm not giving any new information to people by having a conversation about this. I'm just giving perspective and insight on the topic
of a real person. Like somebody who actually exists within the culture of these events happening.
And has no like monetary influence and has no
no monetary gain from having this conversation either. I mean, like there's nothing to be gained from this except the fact that like maybe we feel better after having this conversation. But then even to kind of shit on that idea a little bit, I mean, look what they've done with fucking net neutrality. They're trying to rip these sort of platforms away from the people again. Yeah. We finally found a way in to become relevant and have these discussions where, I mean, you and I aren't getting any fucking viewers, but I mean, people like Rogan and people all throughout the fucking streaming communities and podcast communities are going to be fucked over by these laws, written by just this many people that are, and then they're going to affect everybody. It's again, it's just this unfair system.
It's like a systematic desire for control, but just on a more commercial level now.
Yeah,
It's people that can't control things within their own lives, and then they end up at some sort of corporate entity, and they can't control things there. But the corporation itself can control some sort of like thought pattern amongst the people that it's influencing.
yeah,
And that's disgusting and ego-driven, and like you shouldn't feel like you need to control anyone in your life,
yeah, exactly.
let alone people that aren't in your lives.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like that should be common sense.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it's not. It's not.
And that should be like just regarded as a grotesque way to live, honestly.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that assessment. Maybe moving on from this because it's something that it's like been so.
Yeah, how long was that?
I don't know, probably like 20 minutes.
20 minutes of gun talk.
I don't know. Do we have like a runtime on this? I should probably find that out. Yeah, I don't know. What else is there on the docket? We've got a bunch of things that happened this week. We've realized that kipping pull-ups are unsafe. Don't ever do them. Don't ever do them. There's no reason to. Kipping pull-ups are an inferior exercise to just static pull-ups to begin with. They're murderous on your shoulders and low back and just pretty much every muscle group that you can imagine. And also they're unsafe because your hands can slip off the bar and cause you to go flying 20 feet in the air and thus receive a concussion.
Yeah, honestly, if you're kipping right now, you're a scrub.
Yeah, you're a fucking idiot. Stop kipping immediately. That's something we should enact through legislation as well. Just kipping pull-ups. The act of kipping is just illegal now. Just stop it. Stop it immediately.
Here's an interesting thought I had in regards to like government.
Yeah.
I was sort of equating the Roman government. Fuck up the timeline, but the Roman government in the time of Jesus's existence, and also the Roman government and its influence on the way that people could pray or act, and how impactful that was in their daily lives. I guess I need to think about this a little more, but basically I'm considering, like, would it be right or wrong at this point for the U.S. government to come out and say that Scientology, which is regarded and documented as an actual religion now, and it's a non-taxed organization in the same way that, like, Catholic organizations aren't taxed.
Yeah.
Would it be right or wrong at this point for the U.S. government to go and say that Scientology is having more of a negative impact on American society and American people than it is a positive impact?
Yeah.
And how is that any different from the Romans going out and telling people that they couldn't practice their Christianity?
Yeah.
Or the Romans going out and saying that people couldn't be like Muslim if they were in a certain part of the world.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the biggest difference, just outright, is that we don't feed people to lions anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. The biggest difference.
But yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying. Definitely. I also think that it could also be more justified now in that we have advancements in science and can prove that certain behavioral patterns and beliefs are toxic to communities. That being Scientology in that particular case. I mean, they have practices that force you to cut off family members and all kinds of other shit.
Yeah.
I mean, I know very little about the specifics of Scientology.
I suppose the bigger question is, like, does the government at this point, the government just being people, groups of people, do they have the right to say that, like, dogma in any of its variations is more harmful than it is positive. I know where I fall on that sort of, but like to
Where do you fall?
have an entire government entity come out and say that any dogma is more or less important to the progression of like the survival of the American culture or the survival of just people in general is such a vague, like we're such a vague source of ways to like navigate through that currently.
Yeah.
Personally, I think that blind dogma within any religion or any reflection of the way that you live in your day-to-day life probably negatively impacts you and the people around you more than it does positively impact people. However, if someone wanted to call like the way that I eat a dogma and then say that the dogma is negative, then I would have to defend that somehow, which kind of contradicts like where I presently stand with that. I think the question then is, can we have a progressively ethical society without dogma taking over the predominant influence on being ethical? Are we intrinsically ethical, or are we only ethical because of the conditioning and basically the dogmas that have been like impacting us for our entire lives?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know where I stand on that, to be honest. It's kind of a deep fucking concept.
Yeah, new idea just today. But it started with just thinking that from my perspective, Scientology seems like a horribly toxic and harmful place for people to be in.
Yeah.
Like what I've heard Lee Remini talk about, and one of the leaders who left and wrote a book and basically abandoned his family and had to like run away from where he was living.
Yeah.
His son came after him, like basically physically through like this mafia sort of state within Scientology that came after him and threatened his life. There's so many things going on behind closed doors in the same way that things were going on behind closed doors in Christianity and in Catholicism for centuries that we didn't know about. It seems like we're just learning pretty quickly about Scientology and about the negative influence that it has in people's lives.
Yeah. I think a lot of that's probably attributed to just technological advancements, the availability of social media, things like that. But, I mean, you know, Christianity and Catholicism and other religions, various pagan religions were around prior to social media and the information age. So I think Scientology is probably just falling, I wouldn't say victim, but falling victim to the fact that people are just more aware because of what's available to them. And so people hear stories immediately about fucking Scientology nightmares, or, you know, somebody who... what is that term? There's like a practice that they do within the church where they like cut certain people off, whether it's a family member or whatever.
I do know once you get to a certain place within like the hierarchy in Scientology that you are pretty much done associating with people on a day-to-day basis
Really?
that aren't involved in Scientology.
That's crazy. Yeah, there is a particular practice that they have where, when in the process of trying to, God, what's the word for it? What is the end goal of Scientology? Like, what do they hope? What is the Scientologists' best hope for, like, the afterlife? And I mean, are you familiar with any of that?
I can't say confidently. I know that I forget the name for it, but you can reach a status where basically you are like the equivalent to the enlightened. And then everyone in the church becomes your servant.
That's crazy.
So like if if you somehow capture like part of Tom Cruise's personal life, which is hardly captured anymore because of his involvement with Scientology.
Yeah.
He essentially on set, on the movies, and in his day-to-day personal life, has something like 50 to 100 slaves, basically, that are loyal Scientologists that are lower on the social hierarchy than Tom Cruise is, or John Travolta, or any of these fucking megastars that are involved.
Hey.
And the church benefits them in every way. So,
yeah, that's crazy.
That becomes sort of an aspiration for the other influential people that involve themselves in Scientology.
Yeah.
They give their money to the church. It just has all the classic components of a cult or some sort of unhealthy dogma.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
That's been used for a source of power for some fucking maniacs.
Yeah,
over and over again.
And the behavior that I'm referring to is also like textbook culty shit too,
Totally.
where when you have people who are presenting counter arguments to Scientology, or be it whatever, the act of cutting those people off in your life, whether they're family members or other loved ones, they cut themselves off from them. They strip themselves of that person and never interact with them again. I forget, and there's a term for it that they use within Scientology, specific to Scientology, but I forget what it is.
And that's a red flag in so many regards. Like even on an more individualized basis, if I go out and I date someone, and then suddenly I tell them that I want them to like stop communicating with everyone that they communicated beforehand.
Yeah.
Without some sort of like brainwashing or some sort of like instilling of some toxic dogma, they would just walk away from that.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
if the positive for them being involved in now the cult of Caleb was helpful in their lives, then they would probably go out and do that.
Yeah.
But that's classic cult behavior.
Classic culty shit, man.
Yeah.
And people buy into that too.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that also has made its way into government lobbies as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was kind of your point, in saying like, well, when is it the government's not the government's duty, but like when is the government doing too much to police that sort of behavior? And that's kind of like the balance that we struggle with is like, who else is going to challenge these organizations, lawfully, and ensure that what they're doing is appropriate, other than some sort of established government. But in order to do that, you need to hand over more and more power, to the government.
Yep.
It happened after 9/11 with the Patriot Act and all kinds of other stuff too. It's like people are like, oh, this terrifying thing happened, so let's give more over to the government. And now we have the NSA, and they're listening to literally everything.
Yeah.
And you see advertisements for shit that you've only had conversations about and haven't even done internet searches for, and it conveniently shows up on your fucking feeds and stuff. So there's things like that happen, and it's weird when you see it, and almost like a trip, and it almost seems surreal. It doesn't seem like it's actually happening. These conflicting forces put you it creates this necessity for doing something that's maybe not beneficial in the long run. It's weird. It's kind of like the whole going back to the gun debate, and not to beat a dead horse because I don't want to get on that for another fucking half an hour. But you ultimately are left with the choice of, we need to do something extreme to deal with this extremity that we currently are facing, and whose job is it to call these things toxic?
How do we sort of evaluate whether this growth is healthy or cancer?
Yeah, precisely.
Within our society.
Yeah. I assume at some point we have to draw the line somewhere, and I think with the Catholic Church, it was like they're touching fucking little boys and little girls.
With religion, it's so difficult and don't get me wrong, I don't even think that it's the government's place to do that, because I think as soon as they say you can't be a Scientologist anymore, that gives them the same power to say, like, yeah, we're done with Hinduism, or like we're done with like Muslims.
Yeah, fuck Muslims.
America, you know, which is not okay.
Yeah. No, it's not, especially since like one of our founding principles.
Do you decide that they're a tax-free organization? Do you regard them as like something different within society because they are Scientologists? Do you give them that sort of like acclamation or claim rather that they might receive in Hollywood, sort of? That is the case in Hollywood, where like if you're on a certain level within Scientology, like odds are in Hollywood you're going to do better.
Yeah,
which is insane.
Yeah,
but that was probably the case with. It was absolutely the case with what are they called, like the Pharisees in the Bible.
Mm.
I don't know if it's Pharisees, but you know, the religious elders were regarded within their community as like better people and more enlightened. And hopefully that's not being perpetuated in the same way that it is like with religion now. I think that your experience with religion and your ability to proactively live out the religion that you subscribe to should have nothing to do with your status within your community or within your country, within your nation, whatever it is.
Yeah. I mean, that is an interesting assessment, or not assessment, an interesting point, though, because the second that you decide to start policing people based on like what their belief structures are, I guess you have to go back to the drawing board with how do you define what a religion is, and is Scientology a religion? Does it meet certain criteria? And is it okay to change the definitions of those sorts of things? It's okay, like when we're talking about planets. I mean, Pluto was downgraded from being a planet to, you know, whatever the subcategory of planets are, because we discovered more about the workings of the universe and how solar systems and things like that function. So what's to say that we haven't made strides in that respect with regards to religion? You know, we've seen that religious behavior in a lot of situations does have negative impacts on people's developmental growth. Fuck, dude, even IQ. You know, like it's easier to brainwash people who have a lower IQ, and in a lot of situations, I think that religions tend to operate on manipulative tactics and breaking people down to the point where they feel sort of insignificant. It's kind of like what the military does too, and then you throw this overarching goal at everybody. You know, who after you break them down, you're just like, this is what your doctrine is now, and people just kind of buy into that. Yes, I see the way now. And because of the tribal nature that humans just have, I mean, you look at sports teams, you look at fighters, and, you know, any sort of competitive arena, people get very, very tribalistic about that stuff. And the behavior is funny. I mean, you go to a fucking Dodger game wearing like a jersey from another team, and you get jumped. So people have always had this innate responsibility to a banner. You know, like a greater. You know, they're always seeking greater purpose, but I think that religions and even non-religions like fucking Scientology kind of exploit that behavior in humans, and they've just been smart enough to figure out that that's how humans function, and it's easy to manipulate people into cutting off very important figures in their life. Parental figures, brothers, sisters. I mean, and to us, those are red flags. But to a lot of people who are, you know, maybe in a situation in their life where they're vulnerable and willing to hear some sort of perspective that offers that kind of advice, excuse me, then, you know, the very design of religion is built around exploiting that, you know,
Yeah.
that human trait.
Yeah, historically that is the case.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't want to call it weakness, but I mean, it is ultimately it's a weakness that people have. And again, that filters into behaviors surrounding gun culture and everything else too. I mean, there's a lot of weird culty shit that happens there. So I mean, I don't know. I don't know where the fuck we're headed, you know, as a society, but I feel like something at this point, third party, needs to happen. Like, fucking Yellowstone needs to erupt and just hit the reset button on this because we're becoming too dangerous for this planet, you know. But you know, it's all simulation in the end. So
I gotta pee. Here's my
Yeah.
foot.
I'm gonna grab a beer too. I'll be right back. Here's my foot. What up, stream? One watching? Oh, that's us. Well, eventually.
still alive.
Yeah.
Cool. Well,
Yeah. I do. Let's not get banned off of YouTube, though.
Oh yeah. That's real.
Yeah. Yeah, we could actually get banned.
What should we bring on?
Yeah, first
Yes.
person.
Yeah.
Jordan would be cool.
Wouldn't be interesting.
Jordan would be really cool. He kind of wants to hear more about our simulation theory.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think he's actually open to the talk because he wanted to get into it the other day, but I was just like super baked at the time. I was like, "You want to have this conversation now?" And he was like,
Yeah, I'm not gonna be able to articulate.
Yeah,
it
I
as
was
well
like-
as I normally might.
"Yeah, I don't know." But yeah, he could be super cool. I think having oh man, you know who else could be interesting? Having like Megan and her mom on possibly to talk about CBD.
Yeah, seriously.
And what that is like in a climate like Colorado. That'd be super interesting.
I'd like to even just to create the timeline now. Like you and I both started taking CBD topically.
Yeah.
For me, it was like the first time taking it topically.
Mhm.
I had ingested it in like edible form, and also like smoked things that were like more rich in CBD before.
Yeah.
But topically, was it today or yesterday? Yesterday, last night was the very first time.
Yeah.
And I lifted this morning and felt great. Like I put it on before I lifted and felt
Yeah.
pretty wonderful. Yeah, and I don't know how much I'm pretty willing to admit placebo effect and then admit that I also like just want to believe in things
Mhm.
like that when I'm doing something like holistically or
Yeah.
otherwise.
Yeah.
So day one, feel pretty good.
Yeah.
With the CBD use.
I definitely like it.
I'm really curious to see too. Like, there's been really profound results through different trials and studies on how CBD affects anxiety after taking it for a period of time. So they say like
Even
after
topically?
30 days topically or ingested
Interesting.
orally or different ways, it can have an effect on
Cool.
lowering anxiety levels and depression levels.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. I didn't know that. That's really cool though.
Yeah. My interest and my experience with supplementation, for the most part, is that it takes a period of time to sort of fashion your awareness of how that supplement is affecting you. Cannabis was like that for me in the very beginning, where I wasn't necessarily like able to fashion that sort of awareness of what was happening neurologically, and just like physically and muscularly with cannabis. And then I became aware later on. The same thing with nootropics,
Yeah.
where it was like, to begin with, I didn't necessarily see the effects because I didn't know how to quantify and measure those.
Yeah.
In the same way that I might using like other drugs or otherwise.
Yeah. Reflecting back on it now, I definitely agree with you. I think in the moment I was super eager to like want to see those results.
Yeah.
That I was like,
totally.
yeah, I feel like I have a more accessible vocabulary. I am experiencing better short-term memory retention. Although I do really kind of think that was true because
I'm quite sold on the effect that nootropics can have. I think the effects of like the lion's mane mushroom, the effect of different roots. Like if we're already optimizing and using supplementation, using herbs, and using things found in nature to affect us on like a muscular level or on like our endocrine systems and different things like that, then why are we not immediately trying to progress the field of study of using those herbs to affect us cognitively?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Seriously, I don't know. I mean, that's a really good question.
Yeah. If we were definitely like, we jumped to entertaining that like the scientists using medication to affect us cognitively, not even with things found like in nature, things that you could just pull from nature and ingest. Why would we not want to do it that way?
I don't know, man. I mean, yeah. I mean, why wouldn't we want to do it that way? Especially in so many situations when you look at the most sensical treatment to a lot of ailments is typically found in nature anyway. You know, yet we continue to try to find these combinations of chemicals and the right mixture of this and that to create the perfect pill, which then has 18 million fucking side effects. Whereas with things that are often found in nature have like minimal side effects, except in cases of like an allergy to that particular product. But like weed, I mean, the most side effects from weed are limited to a little bit of paranoia, depending on your strain and how much you smoke.
Depending on your genetics.
Yeah, depending on your genetics.
So many things.
And some slight nausea here and there. That's mostly with edibles, I would say, though. I don't really experience too much of a nausea with smoking. So I mean, it would just make sense to like want to try to find the most natural method for treating things. Especially since, fuck, dude, like anything that can be grown in nature or found naturally as a reproductive source in and of itself is efficient and could generate a lot of money there. But again, humans do a lot of things that don't fucking make sense. Let me ask you this though.
Yeah.
What is it about the lion's mane mushroom that is so beneficial? Because I really don't know anything about it.
Yeah, I would have to just suggest reading Paul Stamets, who is a mycologist that talks about that. You can go on his website and buy different supplements too that are all attached to clinical trial and research.
Yeah.
He first blew my mind when I heard him on a podcast, and he talked about how when he was young, he took a dose of psilocybin. I forget what he said it was, somewhere between 3.5 and 5 grams of psilocybin mushrooms. He set out with the intention of fixing his chronic stutter. He had heard before that people had sort of set intentions for their psilocybin experience and come away with like incredible results, mostly in regards to like cognitive function.
Okay.
Yeah, it's so hard to articulate what's happening with psilocybin in the brain, and why that could affect the neural pathways that exist currently, and perhaps create new neural pathways. But he walked away from the psilocybin experience and removed his chronic stutter completely, like something that had just been dogging him his entire life
For years.
and then was suddenly gone.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah. So next week we're gonna take psilocybin in here and
Yeah. We will.
we'll just talk about how we wish we were a little taller. So the intention that we grow a bit taller.
Wow. Dude, imagine you can, like, make yourself physically grow. Dude,
We might.
that would be the fucking, like, miracle substance to take, man. Just like, I wish my dick was just like maybe a half-inch in girth thicker. Just kidding. Just kidding. Yeah, man. Psilocybin. Psilocybin. Yeah, and lion's mane is what's predominantly used in all of these nootropics, right? That and like magnesium.
Lion's mane is in a lot of nootropics for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely in the alpha brain.
There's 4 or 5 like super prevalent herbs. It's strange, man. So what's your experience been so far with CBD?
So far I've actually kind of enjoyed it. I've been using it topically. I haven't ingested or done anything like that. But I felt like it helps immediate inflammation of the areas that are affecting me most, and those being my like oblique, psoas, whatever the fuck is happening down like in my hip, and then also the shoulder. The shoulder I've noticed like with just some regular application of it, The mobility throughout the day feels a little bit better.
Yeah. My shoulder felt great this morning. So
Yeah.
I had the same, something similar probably, which is like a bicep tendon issue connecting to a tendon in my shoulder that's causing like a bunch of mobility issues.
Yeah.
And a bunch of like what's becoming like more chronic pain, sort of, even just super minimal.
That's crazy that we both have fucking bicep tendon issues.
Yeah, but the application today felt great, and I went and lifted and like did some overhead lifts for the first time in a while.
Felt good,
which felt really great. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then after the yoga class,
sweat out in the sauna.
Yeah. Yeah. See, I gotta get on that, man. I gotta get in. Like, I've told myself at the beginning of the year, like, you're gonna do active, you know, like, actively make the conscious choice to fucking recover your body this year. You know, and I feel like I've done okay, but there's definitely more I could be doing. There's more improvements. Like, I definitely want to use the sauna stuff because, like, recent like discussions I've heard about it, including the ones that you and I have had, have just been talking about lots of benefits from it.
Like the Dr. Rhonda Patrick stuff. On heat shock proteins.
Yeah.
And like her clinical trials with that have been super insane.
Yeah. Among many just, you know, high performance athlete
that have added heat therapy, heat and cold therapy to their daily regimens. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot to be said for that. So, back to the use of CBD. I feel like it's been okay. I kind of feel like I'm just struggling more with like some shit that I really need to just go to the doctor for and like actually find out like what's happening. But yeah, I definitely feel it like in the sense that it definitely takes the inflammation down and helps me with that. But like I'm 99.9% sure now that this is bicep tendon because when I extend and I can feel like the tendon move over the bone in there and stuff, like that's when it feels like the most painful.
Yeah.
So like for sure it's tendon movement that's the issue. It's just a matter of like getting a fucking MRI. And
so we were saying Megan and Glenda might be interesting to have on for that reason.
Yeah. Because I'm sure their knowledge of like CBD is
they were saying that
more extensive than ours.
That apothecary may be the first, I think within the state of Colorado, the first CBD producer to be bought by doctors and then prescribed by doctors.
Wow.
So it would be like a direct source from their like sort of single origin CBD sort of.
That's right. They did say that, right?
To the doctor.
They were talking to like,
and they made it seem like they'd be the first in the industry to do something like that.
That's actually really cool. Then
it's amazing. Yeah,
it would definitely be fucking cool to have them on then, because that's kind of like pioneering some shit.
Yeah, and that guy's from like the petroleum industry and.
Yeah. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Like when she told us that shit tonight, I was like, oh, cool. So he's got some education behind him and knows some shit. And now is on the opposite end of the spectrum when it comes to that. So that would be a really cool perspective to have. Who else could we have on?
Maybe like some Jehovah's Witness or something.
Fuck that. No, that could actually be kind of cool.
We start debating with like the.
Start discussing simulation
the most
theory with them.
Maniacal of the fucking religious radicals around town.
Jesus Christ. I mean, there are plenty of them. They are in abundance. You know what we could do? We have access to a lot of professional level athletes from the OTC.
Yeah.
We could have some of them on.
Fuck them.
We could put them on blast right there and be like, yo, so why don't you tip? What's going on with that?
Man.
I know that guy's got some money. He'd be riding horses and fencing and shit. It's rich people shit.
I would rather, I don't know. I'm just a hater recently on like athletes for some reason.
Yeah. You know what I think we should do for sure, man? I think we should reach out to Rose
Yeah.
and try to get her. I mean, not on our podcast, because why would she ever come to some random person's fucking condo? But get her into the shop
Yeah.
and feed her. And if she hates it, then she hates it. But I don't think she will. I think we've got options.
What's her diet like? Do we know it all?
No.
I'm curious.
No.
She's vegan.
Cool.
She might be.
We have options. We have options. But dude, she's got 750,000 followers. She's a badass. She's a fucking goddamn champion. She's local. You know? She's in Colorado. And I think our shit is like in line with, you know, the MMA person's fucking diet. And I think she's cool enough to maybe just be like, yeah, let's go down there. Yeah. That would be fucking cool.
Yeah, we gotta figure out a way to entice her.
We would have to wear our best clothing. Absolute bad. I'd be in a tuxedo.
I think she likes beads. She likes those the prayer beads.
Right. So just being a couple like really deep V-necks with like prayer beads.
Yeah. Some nice flowing pants.
Yeah, some nice flowing pants, little flowy pants.
No shoes.
Just like greet her, like come up to him capoeira.
No socks.
Hello. Yeah, man. She would be really cool to get in. And then, yeah, eventually, hey, we also have this podcast that no one watches.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we got one follower.
We got one. Yeah, we got one. I think it's us. I definitely think some business owners throughout town would be really cool to have on. That fucking, what's his name? Eric, the principal's office.
Yeah.
He'd be pretty cool to have on.
Yes.
And he's cool enough with Anna to probably maybe want to come on. So he would have a lot of interesting perspective, I think, in just culture throughout town, because he's been in a lot of scenes, man. He did the yoga thing for a while. He did the musician thing with Austin, his band, for a while. And then he successfully fucking helped open, you know, 2 or 3 different establishments for food shit now. So he's a badass. He's cool. Plus, in like just the brief conversations and stuff that I've had with him before, he's like a really cool dude. So I think he'd be some pretty cool conversation.
The owner of is it Ola? Ola and Moxie, I think, are the same owners now.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That'll be interesting.
Yeah, I've never been
Their
into
opinion
Ola
on
at all.
like sort of moving the idea of vegan eating into Colorado Springs. That'll be interesting. Yeah, Ola's alright.
Yeah, I think the idea of vegan eating is here, for sure. You know, like people are there and willing to hear it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are afraid because they feel like they don't have options. And that's like the biggest challenge that I ran into the first time that Anna and I tried to, go vegetarian. It was just like, nothing's available. And it just takes a little bit of research. But I think having more places, you've got Moxie, you've got the Burrowing Owl, you've got, what else is there in town? You've got Santana's. And
The place we're going to open up in the Pikes Peak.
Exactly. We're the place that we're going to fucking open up in the goddamn Pikes Peak Market. 2018.
2018.
Yeah, 2018 is happening. Yeah, it's going to happen. We're not accepting applications at this point in time.
No. There will be no sponsored people.
There would be no sponsored athletes. Unless, of course, you are like A tier. I mean A tier athlete.
Yeah.
Okay. Then come at me and we'll talk. Otherwise, get your no-tip looking ass out of here. And I'm not trying to fire shots, but seriously, I mean, you're getting free shit on a daily basis. You know, tip.
Hey, fuck.
Hey, tip. It ain't easy, bro. On another note, I hope Dan's okay. I did text him tonight, and he said that he's hoping to be discharged out. We've previously fired shots at kipping pull-ups earlier on in the show, if you can even call it that. But again, don't kip. It's not worth it. Dan gave himself a fucking concussion today because he did some kipping pull-ups, and hats off to the guy. Hope he's all right. I think he will be okay.
Strict pull-ups.
Strict pull-ups. Form is important, people. Form is the most important aspect.
Let it hang.
Yeah. Just remember that. It's not about volume, you know. I mean, in anything about like sex, you're pumping away, but like if the quality of the pump is just inferior, it's a shitty experience for everybody, you know. Quality, form, perfect that, you're good. You're good. You won't get a concussion. Strict pull-ups, it's hard to get a concussion from that. That's like I was saying.
Good point.
Yeah.
Good point. Yeah.
The fuck is happening with my...
Hard to get a concussion with hitting the spot.
Yeah.
It's over. How long is this thing?
Probably like 2 hours. I think we did okay. Yeah, we had some good discussions. All right, so with that, I think we're probably gonna call it here. If you do end up watching it, thanks. We're gonna try to do this more regularly. We should really try to do this more regularly. It's fun for one. I enjoy doing it, and it helps get a lot off the chest. Therapeutic. And I think that getting some guests on here would be really cool. For that to happen, though, I do want to get like a setup.
Totally.
Some better lighting. Mics. We need mics. Because this is probably going to sound like shit, too. For which I apologize.
It'll sound wet.
Yeah. Sound wet and hollow. Hollow, like you're in a hallway. Alright, so we're going to peace out. If you tuned in, thanks. If not, then go fuck yourself. Remember to tip.
Pursue